Welcome to our skill training program for motor control on the quarterback's throw in American football. The throw itself, without getting too bogged down in the rules, is an integral part of the game. It is more or less what kicking is to Australian rules. As you can see here, the ball is thrown and it's used to move the team down the field, but also it's used to score and put points on the board as well. So it's a heavily utilised skill and one that's an integral part of the game. As far as its one-dimensional skill classification goes, the quarterback throw is a far more open skill than closed. It's always being performed in a changing environment, be it different amounts of tacklers coming at the thrower, different tactics from play to play, making it more open. On the gross and fine continuum, it is a more gross motor skill than a fine motor skill, although it does have some fine elements to it, such as imparting the spin on the ball, but for the most part it uses a lot of muscle groups and a lot of joints, making it a gross motor skill. And it does have a fairly obvious beginning and end, which would make it a more discrete motor skill as compared to a continuous one. Classification of the football throw under Gentile's taxonomy would indicate as a 4D skill. That's due to its in-motion regulatory conditions, the inter-trial variability, two throws are ever very rarely the same, the body transport that takes place, and the fairly obvious object manipulation. After going through some sources from both past and present players and coaches, there were some fairly obvious key aspects that were mentioned by all of them in regard to the football throw. The first one is the grip and the way the hands are positioned on the ball and around the laces. It's important to note that this is very much an individualized aspect of the throw. Many different players at the professional level do it very differently, but all are able to succeed in their own way. So it's important to make sure the mechanics of what happens at this stage are done correctly, but as far as the actual hand placement, that's very much up to the subject. The stance is a fairly self-explanatory one. We want some knee bend, but the upper body remaining fairly erect and upright. The arm position and release point is a really important one. That's basically the crux of the entire throw. Having a proper arm position and release point aids in accuracy, stops an improper throwing motion that can lead to injury, and aids in the time taken to release the ball as well. Transferring weight and, as a result, rotating the hips is important in allowing the arm to come through and aids in the accuracy of the throw as well. And obviously, as is the case with a lot of skills, the follow-through is obviously a very important part also. The pre- and post-test measures of performance were done by adapting the Buckley kicking test from the AFL Draft Combine, replacing the kicker with a thrower, and adjusting the distances slightly. The verbal cue mentioned is read out by the feeder to the thrower, and that's an indication of which hat or which target the thrower has to throw to, and the effectiveness of that throw is graded by the point system that you can see. Here's just an example of that throw. A cue is given by the feeder and the throw is made. Obviously you would have people on each one of the cones. Due to numbers we weren't able to do that, but the principle is still the same. A cue is given and the throw is graded based on its execution. The pre-test would obviously be completed before the implementation of the skills training program, and the post-test after the completion of the 5-week training program. As far as retention and transfer tests go, we would propose a week of no practice following the completion of the 5-week training program, and a replication of that testing protocol at the beginning of the next week. As opposed from just assessing performance, the retention test is implemented to try and assess the learning. And as well as that, we would propose a transfer test as another means of assessing learning. As you can see here, there is a tackler running at the thrower and he has to adjust as such. We've tried in a way to replicate that by throwing the ball at the thrower that he has to avoid, and then complete a throw. The method of augmented or external feedback that we gave to the novice was done using the faded feedback method. That is giving less feedback as time goes on both a micro from session to session and a macro from week to week level. And that was done to decrease the dependence and therefore hopefully increase the retention and learning of the skill and to avoid the guidance hypothesis. Our practice would be implemented in a distributed fashion across the 5 weeks. We would have 3 sessions a week running for 30 minutes. The literature indicates that that is more beneficial for continuous skills. We've begun building the skill from the ground up using part practice, but then there is a progression into whole practice where the entirety of the skill is performed, and there's also evidence of blocked and random practice throughout the program. The measures of performance in a qualitative and quantitative sense were fairly basic. As far as quantitative goes, we have the overall score out of 30 for the adapted Buckley kicking test using the scoring system that we've touched on. As far as qualitative goes, we've got a subjective quality of movement assessment by the teacher on how well the performer adheres and executes the key aspects of the skill. And another thing that's used heavily throughout American football is film assessment. So breaking down and qualitatively having a look at the movement via film is also another effective method. Our expectation would be that throughout the training program there would be a shift from the cognitive stage of learning into the associative stage. We wouldn't expect in a 5-week block that there would be a movement into the autonomous stage. That's something that, given the complexity of this skill, would take years, if not longer. So in this period of learning, we would expect a movement into the associative stage. One way we were able to vary up the practice tools used for the learner was initially using a smaller ball so that the learner could understand and properly execute the motion of imparting spin on the ball as it releases from the hand.
Deep down, we could dive. Everything to make us feel alive. We need just our hands to keep us dry tonight. line, so let me go. We'll be breathing underwater. Take my love and let it glow. Feel your line, so let me go. We'll be breathing underwater.